So I really want to thank you for joining us today and participating in the MSEA Campaign 2016 process, which will allow us to share information with educators from all over the state and allow them to directly hear from you. Today's interview is part of that candidate recommendation process, which also includes the written responses you gave us when you submitted your candidate questionnaire. The candidate questionnaires and the interviews are going to be made available to the MSEA Endorsement Council members and to the MSEA Representative Assembly delegates because they're the ones who actually make the decisions. And ultimately, it will be made available also to the National Education Association Endorsement Council, as our process for a federal office specifically includes NEA.
Okay.
We plan to post links to these materials on our website to allow all members an opportunity to view and review your responses and to participate in the endorsement process. So let's get started. The first question that I'm going to give you, and you can choose to use it as an opening statement as well, why do you want to be our U.S. Senator, and why should Marylanders choose you for the job?
Because when I'm gone, I want on my tombstone, I want the words, "He brought jobs to Maryland," to be there. That's my #1 objective as a U.S. Senator, and I believe that a strong economy and people with work and hope and dignity produce great schools. I think you can see some correlation between failing communities and failing schools, and I think that if we can solve what I believe is the fundamental problem of giving people some hope for the future in our state, then a lot of the other things are going to fall into place. I mean, it's not going to happen by itself, but job one, as far as I'm concerned, is to improve our state's economy. I think I can help do that. I've actually worked in the U.S. Senate. I spent 5 years up there as a senior staffer. I've seen how the place works. I've got over 33 years in Maryland. This is my home. I'm an Army brat. I went to DOD schools early on. I'm a product of public education from Virginia, Florida, and university system down in Florida as well. I believe in public education, and I do believe that we can do a lot in the U.S. Senate. Can't do it alone. I mean, we certainly have to work with the state authorities, the county, the local, and Annapolis, but I do believe that the first thing we have to do, as in anything else with national policy, is we have to want to do it. And I believe that as a U.S. Senator, I will bring that kind of dedication and devotion to the state. You know, I don't want to be president. I don't want to be Secretary General of the UN. You know, I want to be a good senator for the state of Maryland. I want to solve our problems or you know, wear myself out trying. And I think education in our state is one of our greatest challenges. And the ironic thing is there's so much potential around us. We are in a perfectly situated part of the country to take advantage of some enormous resources, high technology, low technology, things like the Port of Baltimore, manufacturing. I mean, our state has such potential. But what we need, I believe, is the leadership in Washington, D.C. to tap that potential. And I'm in the Senate race because, with all due respect to our current delegation on Capitol Hill, I think we need to work harder. And I feel that I can do that work, I know how to do it, and I'm ready to do it.
Thank you. This next question is about your relationship with our organization. MSEA is a union, a professional association, and a social justice organization. Our members are leaders on issues that are in the best interests of students, educators, and working families across the state. We're often at the center of issues that have incredible importance to all Marylanders, since we all share the goal of creating a world-class system of schools for every student. How would you work with MSEA in setting your agenda and tackling big issues of common interest?
First thing I would do is what we're doing right now. I mean, I actively look forward to coming for this conversation because I think there's a tendency to see Republican candidates, and I am a Republican. I'm a Republican because of Abraham Lincoln and no one else. And you know, the tendency is to think that people want to run away from organized labor and public employees and so forth. And this is actually my third interview. I've been to the International Machinists Union, I've been to AFL-CIO for DC Maryland Council, and I think it just, not only does it make sense, it's essential to find a way to work, particularly with an organization that has such a huge impact on our kids. I think we've got to keep the conversation going. We're not going to agree on everything. And I think that can be done both at this level. I mean, we're sitting down the street, for those of you who don't know it, from the Maryland State Capitol, which is about to go into session. And I'm as interested in your priorities as you probably are in mine. But at the national level, I think, my take and my point of view on the question of public education, not only in America, but in Maryland, is what's in it for, why are we all here? You and me are here to work together for the kids. I mean, that's really the bottom line. What's in their best interests? And how can I, if I'm fortunate enough to be sent to the Senate by my state, work best with all the stakeholders? And MSEA is one of them, along with parents and county officials and so on, to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do, and that is create the best learning environment possible for our kids. And I just want to mention, I've been following this case out in California, Friedrichs versus California teachers. And it's really interesting to see just how the state of California and the federal government have reacted to that situation, which is being argued today in the Supreme Court. California and the federal government are in the case as friends of the court on the side of the organization. And I just wonder, if that case had unfolded here in Maryland, how would it have differed, as it came up through the federal judiciary, and what would your organization have done, and how would you have seen the world? And I think it's important to bear in mind that public education in America is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. What works in California may not work in Maryland. And I think we have to understand those differences. I mean, my mom is a teacher, retired teacher. She spent 35 years teaching in the Archdiocese of St. Petersburg, Florida. And I talk to her often about this and how things changed since she started and so on. And there's a lot of wisdom out there. We just have to have the wisdom to go look for it. And I'm a great believer in conversations. I'm a great believer in feedback. I was a big shot in the Pentagon in the Bush administration, and the most important person I had in my office was the one who came to me after and said, you really did that wrong. You need to think about this approach. And that's extremely valuable when you find yourself in a position where you have the people have given you authority to affect their lives. Emperor has no clothes. You need to know it. So it's kind of my take on it.
Thank you. This next question is about testing. Congress recently approved and President Obama signed the Every Student Succeeds Act. MSEA was a strong supporter of the legislation that replaces the failed policies of No Child Left Behind and puts the onus of policy matters related to testing, school accountability, teacher evaluation, and support for low-performing schools back to the states and the school districts. Specifically related to testing, do you support President Obama's recommendation to limit the amount of time spent on mandated testing to no more than 2% of instructional time?
Well, let me put it this way. I'm aware of the statute that you've talked about, that the President just signed into law. I understand that it was one of the few episodes in recent years of true bipartisanship on Capitol Hill, where Republicans and Democrats really did work together. And as far as a specific percentage goes, I guess the way I look at it is this: who do I trust at the end of the day to tell me what's the best thing to do in the classrooms in terms of how much time we devote to testing and so on? It's you, it's the parents, it's the school administrators. And I think that if the President's policy represents that consensus, then we certainly can't dismiss it. We have to give it careful thought. And for me, you mentioned local control in counties and so forth. I mean, that's kind of for me, that's the oracle. I think that's the best place to go to find reliable information, credible information about what it takes to teach kids in this school. I live in Prince George's County, and my school district is a public high school called Parkdale, and maybe 2% is good, maybe it's 3%, maybe it's less. But I don't see the task of the U.S. Senator to be substituting judgment for professionals like yourself and like your listeners, parents, and the administrators. Let's find out what the consensus is, and then let's decide as as people who are really concerned about what's in the best interest of the kids, whether that's the right way to go. And I think that if the president is acting consistently with the statute he just signed, I think that's a positive thing for Maryland.
Thank you. And beyond the amount of time we spend on testing, what's your opinion on the appropriate role for those tests? What do they have what's their role in student placement, student graduation, high-stakes personal decisions for teachers and principals?
You know, I think we've seen over the last 10 years, maybe longer, an evolution. And then, again, I'm not a teacher, and I'm not an administrator or an education professional, but I've had children go to college and go through testing and so forth, and I try to understand it from the perspective of a parent. And what I see is progressively universities and so on are looking beyond the testing. I mean, it's an easy, you need a benchmark, but I think it's healthy and a good evolution that the schools look beyond that benchmark and try to get a better picture, the whole picture, for a particular student. And I'm going through this right now. I have two children. They're recent immigrants from Mexico. Only been in the United States for about 2.5 years. Picked up English like that. Immersion works. And now the older of the two is in the process of applying for university. And it's been a real eye-opener to see how the different schools apply the different criteria, of course testing being one of them. I think it's healthy to get a better picture of the student. When I got out of high school, I was 17, I went directly into the Navy. My dad had to sign for me because I was under 18. My test scores were awful. And the refrain I heard throughout my entire high school career was, such potential. Where's that potential? Well, I think there was potential, but it took a while to find it and develop it, and I think that's kind of the answer to testing. You can't take that cookie cutter approach. So what works for the kids, I think, probably works for teachers too. How do you measure the success of a teacher? I think about my own from back when I was in high school and who had the most influence. And some of them, they probably weren't, Harvard scholars, but they had the passion, they had that fire down below that really distinguishes a good teacher from, or anybody in their profession. And I don't think testing does that necessarily. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have that as part of the picture, but it shouldn't be the decisive factor, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. And this last question is about campaign 2016, and I want to give you an opportunity to share with our members any closing thoughts you might have. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on how this very competitive race, how you win this very competitive race, and what immediate priorities you have once taking office in 2017.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. I think the way to win in Maryland, no matter who you are, no matter what your party affiliation, is to give people something to vote for. It's not just change, it's progress. And I believe that I've got enough time in this state to understand the tangible and intangible factors that affect what has been happening here. I offer a combination of not just time and effort and some public service in Maryland, but also a federal perspective, which you need as a U.S. Senator. I'm an Iraq veteran, I served in the Navy, I have time in the Foreign Service, I spent time in the executive branch. And I think that's significant because one of the things that I've seen as a former worker on Capitol Hill is that frequently when you have inexperienced people representing you on Capitol Hill, it's easy for the executive branch to run circles around them. I think a good senator, Republican or Democrat, at some point is going to butt heads with the president. Doesn't matter. If it's my own party, sometimes the president's wrong. And my job as a senator from Maryland is to stand up and say, we're not doing that. That's not good for Maryland. And that's why I say, I don't want to be president. I just want to be a good senator for our state. I want to bring work here. I want to see people, all people, with hope, jobs, a future, and hope. And I'm a real optimist. I think that we can definitely do that. It's a tough campaign. 2016 is not my first time. I did it in 12, and I came in second in the Republican primary. I won Baltimore City and 11 counties, and I intend to win this time. But I guess what I can promise the voters of Maryland is the very best that I can possibly do. I will always put them first. I will always put them above party, and I will always put them above president if that's necessary. So I believe in public sector, I believe in organized labor. I try to imagine what America would be like without it. And I don't think it would be half as much, half as wonderful a country as we have. So my mom's a teacher. I'm a product of public education. I've seen corners of it that most people don't see. And I'm very proud of that. I feel extremely fortunate at my age to have come up in the system we have. And I want that for kids that are coming up now. That's what I want for them. So, and I want to thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you.
Well, I really want to thank you too. I want to thank you for going through our process and letting our members get to know you. And I also want to wish you well in the campaign,
Well, thanks.
and good luck.
We'll keep trying.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.